Usually when we talk about looking at ancient ruins like the Parthenon in Athens or the Colosseum in Rome, there is this built-in expectation of distance.
Yeah, it feels very safe.
Exactly. You walk through a museum, you look at the broken marble columns, you read the little brass placard, and the tour guide points and says, there it is, that's history.
Right, it's binary, it is securely in the past. We really like the past to stay in the past.
Oh, for sure.
We want it neatly categorized behind velvet ropes, completely separated from the messy, complicated realities of our modern lives.
Right. It's dead stone. It is clean. But then you step into the world of ancient Greek tragedy, and suddenly those velvet ropes are completely gone.
They really are.
We are looking at a landscape of intense human suffering, of guilt, of trauma, and of deep spiritual longing that is, quite honestly, bleeding right into our present reality.
Absolutely.
So today we are going on a very special journey. We are doing a deep dive into Sophocles, a final masterpiece, the ancient Greek tragedy Oedipus at Colonus.
A phenomenal text.
It really is. It was written around 406 BC and first performed in 401 BC. But here's the twist for you listening today. This is not just a literary review.
No, not at all.
We aren't just here to talk about ancient theater. Our mission today is to explore how this 2,400-year-old pagan play can profoundly deepen a Christian's faith.
Which is a bold claim, I know.
It is, but we want to see how it can inspire a deeper love for Christ and challenge believers to live more fully for him in their daily lives.
Which I have to admit is an incredibly ambitious mission. Because on the absolute surface level, you are looking at a polytheistic play about a cursed, incestuous parricide.
Right, a man who unwittingly killed his father and married his mother.
Exactly. It is dark. It is brutal. So how on earth does a story like that point anyone to the gospel?
That is exactly the question we are going to answer. We have been poring over a fascinating stack of research to help us bridge this gap today.
We have a lot of ground to cover.
We really do. We are looking at the translated text of the play itself, alongside some truly exhaustive historical and linguistic analysis.
The linguistic stuff is wild.
It is. There is this whole framework called Systemic Functional Linguistics that completely blew my mind.
Oh yeah, regarding how the original Greek text actually functions like a cinematic camera lens.
Yes. We're going to unpack all of that. But we are also weaving in a robust biblical and theological critique, looking at how the themes in this play collide with the Old and New Testaments.
And the way we ultimately bridge that gap, from a pagan tragedy to a vibrant Christian faith, is by focusing on the universal human longings that Sophocles captures so perfectly.
Right.
We are talking about the desperate longing for sanctuary, the need for our suffering to have some kind of meaning,
Yeah.
and the ultimate desire for a curse to somehow be turned into a blessing. Sophocles masterfully outlines the exact shape of these human needs. But as we will see, it is only Christ who perfectly and eternally fulfills them.
So to really grasp the weight of these spiritual longings, we can't just look at the characters in a vacuum.
No, you have to look at the audience.
Exactly. We have to understand the people who were sitting in the amphitheater watching this play for the very first time. Take us back to Athens. What was life actually like in 401 BC? Because this isn't the golden age of democracy anymore, is it?
Not at all. If you want to understand Oedipus at Colonus, you have to understand that the original audience was a profoundly, fundamentally traumatized group of people.
Traumatized is the right word.
It is. This isn't an audience looking for light entertainment on a weekend. We're looking at the citizens of Athens recovering from the devastating Peloponnesian War.
Remind us of the scale of that war.
So this was an existential conflict against the Sparta and Thebes alliance.
Yeah.
And it dragged on for nearly 3 decades. From 431 to 404 BC.
3 decades of war, that alone is going to rewire a society's brain.
Exactly. And it wasn't just a distant war fought on foreign soil. It brought wave after wave of catastrophe right to their doorstep.
Right.
Think about the Sicilian disaster, which happened between 415 and 413 BC. Athens, in a fit of extreme imperial hubris, sent a massive armada to conquer Sicily.
And it did not go well.
It was a complete and utter catastrophe. They lost almost their entire fleet and thousands of their best men. It was a psychological blow that completely shattered their sense of invincibility.
And reading through the historical context, the bleeding didn't stop there. The trauma came inside the house, politically speaking.
It did. The external losses triggered massive internal instability. In 411 BC, there was a violent oligarchic coup known as the 400.
Right.
That basically overthrew the Athenian democracy. And what is fascinating for our discussion today is that this coup, this dismantling of their democratic institutions, actually took place right there at Colonus.
Wait, really? At Colonus?
Yes, the very suburb of Athens where Sophocles set this play.
Man, so the location of the play itself is soaked in recent political trauma for the audience?
Completely soaked in it. Thucydides, the ancient historian, explicitly records that the conspirators of the coup convened their assembly at Colonus, in a precinct sacred to Poseidon. So when the audience hears the word Colonus sung by the chorus, they weren't just thinking of a pretty grove with olive trees. They are thinking, that is where our democracy was stabbed in the back.
The layers here are just incredible. And then comes the final nail in the coffin, right?
Yes. In 405 BC, the Athenian fleet is completely crushed by Sparta at the Battle of Aegospotami. It crippled them permanently.
Yeah.
Finally, in 404 BC, Athens is starved into submission and surrenders. The historian Xenophon tells us that the Spartans imposed humiliating terms. They forced the Athenians to demolish their famous long walls.
And the long walls were a huge deal.
Massive. These were the fortifications that connected Athens to its port, Piraeus. They were the ultimate symbol of Athenian independence and security.
So tearing them down was a big
It
statement.
was basically a public psychological castration of the city.
To put that into perspective for a modern listener, imagine if an invading army forced a country to dismantle its entire nuclear arsenal and tear down its most iconic monuments, while enemy soldiers played flutes and celebrated in the streets.
That is a great analogy.
Because I think Xenophon mentions they literally tore down the walls to the sound of flute girls playing, right?
He does mention that, yes. It was meant to be deeply degrading. And then the Spartans installed a brutal puppet regime known as the 30 Tyrants,
Right, the 30 tyrants.
who murdered thousands of Athenian citizens and confiscated their property. It was a reign of terror.
So democracy is finally restored in 403 BC, just a couple of years before this play premieres at the city Dionysia Festival in 401 BC.
Right.
When the citizens of Athens sit down in the theater of Dionysus, they are sitting in a city trying to literally and metaphorically rebuild its walls. They are grieving, they are humiliated, they are battered.
Battered is the perfect word. And that battered condition is exactly what Sophocles puts on stage. Because the very first thing the audience sees is not a proud king, but a battered man.
Let's talk about that entrance, because if you are familiar with the prequel, Oedipus Rex, Oedipus was the absolute pinnacle of human achievement.
He really was.
He was a proud, highly intelligent, sighted, powerful king who solved the impossible riddle of the Sphinx. He was the savior of Thebes.
Yes.
But here, as he steps onto the stage at Colonus, well, he is an old, blind, filthy, impoverished beggar. He has to be physically led around by his daughter, Antigone.
Right.
The researchers analyzing the text describe him as a pharmakos. Unpack that word for us.
A pharmakos in ancient Greek culture essentially means a scapegoat.
Oh,
It was someone who embodied the ritual pollution of a community and was cast out to cleanse the city.
okay.
Oedipus carries an unimaginable weight of miasma or ritual pollution. He is the man who killed his father and married his mother.
Which is heavy.
Even though he insists he did these things unknowingly, that he was a victim of fate and the gods, the pollution is still entirely real in the Greek worldview.
It doesn't matter if it was an accident.
Exactly. It clings to him. He has lost his throne, his sight, his home, his reputation, and his dignity. He is the ultimate exile.
Okay, hold on. This is where I have to pause and look at this from the perspective of an Athenian in the audience.
Sure. If I just survived a 30-year war, lost my empire, watched my walls get dismantled to the sound of enemy flutes, and barely survived the 30 tyrants, the last thing I want to do on my weekend is go to a civic festival and watch a play about a cursed, blind, homeless guy in rags.
It sounds rough.
That sounds utterly miserable. Why would this draw a crowd? Why wouldn't they want a comedy or something uplifting?
Well, because true tragedy doesn't just depress you. It actually gives you a framework to process your own grief.
Oh, I see.
Oedipus isn't just a sad character. He is acting as a mirror. The expert analysis we are looking at points out that Oedipus mirrors the battered Athenian democracy itself.
Oh, wow.
The audience looks at this blind, exiled king, and they see their own exile. They see their own trauma, their own fall from greatness, and their own desperate need for divine protection.
So it's cathartic.
Deeply cathartic. The play is essentially an exploration of post-trauma integration.
Post-trauma integration. Break that down for me. It is the process of figuring out how you survive after the worst possible thing has already happened to you.
Yeah.
How do you move forward when your identity has been completely shattered?
Right.
In Oedipus Rex, the discovery of his crimes led to bitter, destructive shame. I mean, he literally gouges his own eyes out.
Yeah, that is a pretty intense reaction.
Very intense. But here, in Oedipus at Colonus, we are watching a man who has lived with his trauma for decades. He is moving from that raw, screaming shame toward a kind of serene, weather-beaten dignity in his old age. He has accepted his suffering.
I love that phrase, weather-beaten dignity. And this brings up our first major synthesis for the Christian listener, because when you look at how Oedipus mirrors the trauma of Athens, it profoundly mirrors the Christian understanding of what it means to live in a fallen, broken world.
Exactly. Sometimes modern Christianity can fall into the trap of toxic positivity, acting as though faith is a guarantee against pain.
Which it definitely is not.
But if you connect this to the broader biblical picture, the Bible absolutely does not shy away from the terror of aging, the reality of trauma, or the brutal nature of suffering.
Think of the book of Job.
Yes, or think of the Psalms of Lament, where the psalmist is crying out from the absolute depths of despair. The Christian worldview starts with the sober acknowledgement that we live in a world where things break, where bodies fail, where nations fall, and where trauma is an unavoidable reality.
And it goes beyond just physical or emotional trauma. There is the stark reality of spiritual pollution. Oedipus physically represents what Scripture says is true of us spiritually.
Right.
On our own, we are spiritually impoverished. We carry our own kind of spiritual miasma, a pollution of sin that we cannot wash off ourselves. Realizing our own spiritual poverty, coming to the end of ourselves and realizing that we too are the blind beggar, completely dependent on outside help, that is the very first step toward grace.
That is a vital connection. You cannot appreciate the magnitude of a rescue if you don't realize you are stranded in the first place. Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." The Athenians connected with Oedipus because they knew they were broken. For the Christian listening today, witnessing Oedipus's absolute destitution is a vivid reminder that the gospel doesn't start with us bringing our trophies to God.
Right. It starts with acknowledging our absolute spiritual bankruptcy.
Yes.
So Oedipus is this radioactive, polluted outcast. He knows he is broken. He knows he needs a mediator, a sanctuary. But he doesn't just walk into a neutral city square or a random field. He stumbles into the most volatile, holy ground imaginable.
A setting is crucial here.
Let's talk about the specific geography here, because the setting of Colonus is not just a painted backdrop. It acts as an active, terrifying character in the play.
It really does. Oedipus and Antigone wander off the main road and step into a lush, unhewn, unwalkable, sacred grove. And it is not just any grove. It is dedicated to the Eumenides.
The Furies.
Yes, the Furies, the ancient, terrifying goddesses of vengeance and blood retribution.
Not exactly a place you want to stumble into.
No, and the ground is also sacred to Poseidon and Prometheus. It is a place vibrating with divine power. The locals don't even look at it when they walk past. They avert their eyes and utter silent prayers. It is the ultimate do not enter zone.
And this is where the linguistic research we reviewed just blew my mind. The scholars analyzing this text didn't just look at the plot, they looked at the actual grammatical machinery Sophocles used to build the tension in this scene.
The linguistics here are fascinating.
They really are. They used a framework called Systemic Functional Linguistics, or SFL, and I have to admit, when I first saw that term, my eyes glazed over a bit.
It sounds very academic.
But once you unpack it, it is brilliant.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through what SFL is, specifically looking at Campbell's verbal aspect framework?
I would love to, because it completely changes how you experience the play. In English, we rely heavily on the tense of a verb to tell us when an action happened. Past, present, or future.
Right.
But in ancient Greek, the tense of a verb, its aspect, often tells you less about the timeline and more about how the author wants you to view the action. It is about proximity versus remoteness. It is about how close the camera is to the subject.
Okay, the camera lens analogy helps a lot. Keep going with that.
In Campbell's framework, which the linguistic researchers applied to this text, the Greek aorist tense indicates perfective aspect and remoteness. Think of it as a wide, establishing shot. It pushes the action into the background. It says, this happened. It is a settled, distant fact. It is remote.
So when Oedipus and the chorus of locals are talking about his past crimes, the horrific murder of his father at the crossroads, the incestuous marriage in Thebes, Sophocles deliberately has them use the aorist tense.
Exactly. Even though those crimes are the source of his current misery, grammatically, Sophocles is pushing them away. He is using the aorist tense to say, that is the remote past. Keep it at a distance.
Okay, I see.
But, and this is where Sophocles shows his genius as a playwright, when the characters describe the sacred grove they are standing in, and when Oedipus makes his desperate pleas for sanctuary on that holy ground, they shift entirely to the present and perfect tenses.
And let's be really precise here, because the researchers pointed out a common misconception. In this specific linguistic framework, the Greek perfect tense does not just mean completed action with ongoing results, which is how it's often taught in basic Greek classes.
Right. In Campbell's SFL framework, the perfect tense indicates heightened proximity. The present tense indicates proximity.
Heightened proximity. Give me an analogy for how that feels to the audience.
If the aorist tense is a wide drone shot of a car crash that happened 10 miles away, the perfect tense is a GoPro camera strapped to the bumper at the moment of impact. It pulls the action right up to your face. By using the present and perfect tenses to describe the sacred grove, Sophocles is pulling the holiness, the immediate danger, and the terrifying presence of the Furies right up into the audience's face. He uses heightened proximity to make the listener feel the terrifying immediacy of the moment.
That is incredible. So the grammar itself is creating a collision.
Yes.
The horrific past is being pushed into the blurry background, while the sacred, dangerous present is in razor-sharp, terrifying focus. It is like, well, imagine someone carrying a leaking barrel of highly toxic radioactive waste.
Right.
And they don't just walk into a normal building. They waltz right past the velvet ropes and step directly into the Holy of Holies in the ancient temple. The tension is palpable. The audience knows that you cannot mix the ultimate pollution with the ultimate purity without some kind of massive explosion.
That radioactive waste analogy is spot on. And the chorus, this group of local Athenian elders who represent the voice of the community, they react exactly how you would expect when they realize that the blind man standing in their holiest sanctuary is the infamous Oedipus.
Yeah, they absolutely panic.
They completely lose their minds. They had just promised him that no one would drag him away from the grove. But the second they hear his name, they scream at him to get out.
They yell, "Out from these seats, out from my land, and speed thy flight."
Yes, they are terrified that his miasma, his contagious ritual pollution, is going to infect their city and bring the wrath of the gods down on them all over again.
Well, they want to revoke their promise of sanctuary immediately. And we have to pause here and think about what this means for you, the Christian listener. This ancient Greek panic over mixing pollution with holy ground draws a profound, incredibly accurate parallel to the human condition before a holy God.
It really does. The ancient world, both the pagan Greeks and the ancient Hebrews, implicitly understood something that I think modern people often forget. Pollution and holiness cannot just casually mix.
Right. In our modern casual culture, we tend to think of God as just a friendly, validating presence. But the biblical picture of God's holiness is terrifyingly beautiful. It is a consuming fire.
Yes, it is a very serious thing.
Think about the Old Testament. Think about Uzzah touching the Ark of the Covenant to study it and dropping dead instantly.
Right.
Or think about Isaiah in the temple crying out, "Woe is me, for I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips, for my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." There is a terrifying holiness to the presence of God. You can't just stroll up with your leaking barrel of radioactive sin.
Exactly. And this scene with the chorus wanting to expel Oedipus highlights the absolute non-negotiable necessity of mediation.
Yes, mediation is key here.
The chorus realizes there is no mechanism, no ritual, no amount of scrubbing that can make a polluted man safe on holy ground. They have to expel him. But setting up this impossible tension, a polluted man needing sanctuary but bringing danger, helps the Christian listener deeply appreciate the radical, mind-bending nature of the gospel.
Because in the gospel, we don't just figure out a better way to clean ourselves up before we enter the grove.
Yeah.
We don't just stand on the outside looking in. The holy God actually approaches the polluted sinner. Christ becomes the ultimate mediator. He is the one who allows the radioactive waste of our sin to be completely neutralized by his infinite purity.
The cross is where the ultimate pollution meets the ultimate purity, and purity wins.
I love that.
Oedipus had to beg a human king for protection from the gods. Christians have the Son of God offering himself as our protection from the righteous justice of God. It is an astonishing shift in the narrative.
It really is. And The desperate need for a mediator in the play sets the stage perfectly for the arrival of the next character. Because with the chorus ready to physically drag Oedipus out of the city, the situation absolutely requires someone to step in.
Someone has to take control.
It requires a true leader who can bridge the gap between this polluted outcast and the sacred city of Athens. Enter King Theseus.
King Theseus is one of the most fascinating figures in Greek mythology, and Sophocles uses him here to absolute perfection.
He really does.
In the context of Athenian civic pride, Theseus is the founding hero. He's portrayed as the ideal, pious, perfectly balanced ruler. He's the embodiment of everything Athens wanted to believe about itself, that they were noble, just, and compassionate.
And his entrance is a masterclass in leadership. He rides in, he surveys the chaos, and he completely diffuses it. And what blew my mind is that Theseus knows exactly who Oedipus is.
Yes, he has heard all the stories.
He has heard the rumors, he knows the horrific crimes, he knows the extent of the pollution, but Theseus doesn't recoil. He offers immediate, unconditional sanctuary.
He does. He speaks directly to Oedipus and says this incredible, beautiful line. He says, "Never then would I turn aside from a stranger, such as thou art now, or refuse to aid in his deliverance. For well know I that I am a man, and that in the morrow my portion is no greater than thine."
I am a man, and that in the morrow my portion is no greater than thine. That is just staggering humility from a king.
What is fascinating about this moment is how Sophocles uses Theseus to champion the concept of xenia, which is the ancient Greek concept of hospitality.
Wait, Xenia.
But it is more than just being a good host. It was a sacred duty protected by Zeus himself. By showing Theseus extending xenia to the most polluted man on earth, Athens is portraying itself as the ultimate protector of the vulnerable.
Which was a big point of pride for them.
It is a sharp contrast to Thebes, Oedipus's home city, which threw him out into the wilderness. Theseus doesn't offer sanctuary because he thinks Oedipus is innocent. He knows he's not. He offers sanctuary out of a profound, shared sense of human frailty.
He looks at Oedipus and essentially says, "There but for the grace of the gods go I." This is where the synthesis with Christian theology becomes just staggeringly beautiful, because Theseus's compassion echoes the very heartbeat of the commands we see woven all throughout the Bible.
If you look at the Old Testament foundation, God doesn't just suggest hospitality. He strictly commands Israel to protect and love the sojourner and the outcast.
Yes.
Exodus 22.21 says, "You shall not wrong a sojourner or oppress him, for you are sojourners in the land of Egypt." Leviticus 19.34 commands them to treat the stranger as a native and to love him as yourself.
God is constantly reminding them of their own past vulnerability. Remember when you were slaves. Remember when you had nothing. Act accordingly. And this isn't just an ancient, outdated Old Testament concept.
Not at all.
Jesus brings it right to the absolute forefront of his ministry in the New Testament. In Matthew 25, when Jesus is describing the final judgment, he directly identifies himself with the marginalized and the outcast. He says, "I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me."
The radical nature of biblical hospitality is that you aren't just serving a person in need, you are serving Christ himself. And this brings us to a direct challenge for you, the listener, today.
Right.
Think about Theseus. He was a pagan king in a play, and he welcomed a deeply polluted, cursed man purely out of a shared sense of mortal frailty. He knew he could be in Oedipus's shoes tomorrow, so he helped him today.
So the challenge is, how much more should Christians extend radical, barrier-breaking hospitality to the outcast, the messy, and the marginalized in their own communities? Because Christians have a much deeper motivation than just shared mortal frailty. Christians don't just look at a broken person and say, "I could be in your shoes tomorrow." Christians look at a broken person and say, "I was in your shoes. I was completely polluted by my own sin, alienated and exiled, and a holy God welcomed me anyway at the cost of his own son."
That is the crucial difference. Our hospitality isn't based on mutual risk. It is based on overflowing gratitude. It challenges us to look at the Oedipuses in our own society, the people who are socially messy, the people who carry the heavy baggage of terrible pasts, the people who make us uncomfortable and extend a welcome that reflects the radical grace of the gospel.
Yeah.
If ancient Athens could pride itself on being a sanctuary for the broken, how much more should the local church be known as the ultimate sanctuary?
Okay, so Theseus offers his protection, and you'd think that is the end of the transaction. But here is where the plot takes a wild, supernatural turn. Oedipus isn't just a charity case.
No, he is not.
He doesn't just take the sanctuary and say, "Thank you." He brings something shocking to the table. He proposes an exchange.
This is arguably the central paradox of the entire play. Oedipus makes an astonishing claim to Theseus. He offers his woe-worn body, his physical, polluted, blind, broken self, as a gift to the city of Athens.
He explicitly calls it a gift. He says, I come to offer thee my woe-worn body as a gift, not goodly to look upon, but the gains from it are better than beauty.
Right.
He prophesies, based on an oracle from Apollo, that if Athens protects him and eventually buries his corpse in their soil, his grave will serve as a supernatural protection against future invasions, specifically from their enemies in Thebes and Sparta.
To modern ears, the idea that a dead body protects a city sounds like a fantasy
It
novel.
really does.
To understand this, we really have to unpack the ancient Greek mechanics of the hero cult. In the Greek transactional worldview, the gods dispense fate and humans endure it. But occasionally a person suffers to the absolute utmost limits of human endurance. If that person endures their suffering without breaking, and their life aligns with a specific destiny decreed by the gods, they undergo a transformation upon death. They become a daemon, a powerful protective spirit tied to the earth.
So their physical remains literally become a source of power?
Exactly. His cursed body literally becomes a pharmakon.
Wait, I remember the word pharmakos from earlier, meaning scapegoat or pollution. Pharmakon sounds similar, but what is the difference? Like a pharmacy?
Yes, it is the root of the word pharmacy. A
I see.
pharmakon means a cure, a medicine, or a magical charm. So earlier he was the pharmakos, the scapegoat who carried the disease. Now through his suffering and the decree of the gods, he becomes the pharmakon, the cure.
Oh, wow.
This is the ultimate dramatic irony of the play. The very man whose pollution destroyed his home city of Thebes is going to become the sacred magical anchor that secures his adopted city of Athens. The pollution is transmuted into power.
It is like a theological judo flip. The very weight of his curse, the extreme depth of his suffering, is exactly what gives him his spiritual gravity and his power to bless.
A theological judo flip is a brilliant way to describe it.
Yeah.
For the battered Athenians watching this play, this concept was a massive, profound comfort. Remember, they just lost their walls.
Right.
But here is Sophocles telling them, divine justice can take the worst woe, the deepest trauma, and turn it into civic good. Our suffering can have meaning. We can still be protected.
It is a beautiful sentiment, but when we synthesize this with the Bible, we see a massive structural contrast in how that blessing is actually achieved.
We do.
The research we are looking at pivots beautifully here to the writings of the Apostle Paul, specifically Galatians 3:13. Paul writes, Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us, for it is written, cursed is everyone who is hanged on a tree.
This is a crucial point of distinction. In both the story of Oedipus and the story of Jesus, you have a central figure who is cursed, an outcast whose profound suffering ultimately brings about a blessing for others. But the mechanics of how that blessing works and the scope of that blessing are entirely fundamentally different.
Let's really break that down. How does the pagan blessing of Oedipus actually work mechanically?
Oedipus's blessing requires his bones to stay in the dirt. His body basically becomes a magical relic, a talisman, and it relies entirely on secrecy.
Oh, right.
His grave has to be hidden, known only to Theseus and his successors, so that enemies can't steal the bones. It is a highly localized geographical protection. It only protects Athens, and it only protects them from specific neighboring armies. It is achieved through secrecy and death. He is a powerful ghost, but he is still a dead hero in the ground.
Right. It is magic tied to the soil. But let's look at Christ's blessing. How does the gospel operate?
Christ's blessing doesn't come from stay. His bones rotting in the dirt to create a magical force field over Jerusalem. His blessing comes from an empty tomb.
Yes.
He doesn't stay in the dirt. He achieves actual bodily resurrection. And his blessing isn't a magical relic protecting a single city-state from a neighboring army. It is eternal cosmic grace offered to the entire world. He doesn't just defeat an invading army. He defeats sin, and he defeats death itself.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? How does understanding this weird Greek hero cult actually deepen your Christian faith? I think it deepens it by showing us the absolute limits of what humanity can dream up on its own.
Absolutely.
The ancient Greeks longed so deeply, so desperately, for someone whose suffering could bring them peace. They intuitively knew that the curse of human existence had to be absorbed and transformed by a mediator. But the absolute best they could imagine, the ceiling of their theology, was a localized, buried hero, a ghost in the dirt.
They were asking the exact right question, but they had a tragically limited answer. The gospel offers a living Savior whose redemptive suffering secures our eternal home, not just a plot of land in Athens.
Yeah.
When you read this play and feel the weight of what they were hoping for, you realize how breathtakingly superior the reality of the resurrection actually is to the greatest myths of antiquity. It makes you fall in love with the gospel all over again.
Man, that is powerful. It really makes you appreciate the resurrection as a historical, cosmic victory. But the play doesn't just let Oedipus rest in peace quite yet. Sophocles isn't done with him.
Oh, not at all.
Just as Oedipus finally secures his place and his sanctuary in Athens, his past violently hunts him down. The outside world intrudes. And this reveals some really deep, troubling flaws in the pagan worldview.
Yes. The sanctuary is breached by two figures from his past in Thebes. First, Creon arrives. Creon is Oedipus's brother-in-law, and he currently holds the power in Thebes. He has heard about the oracle from Apollo. He knows that wherever Oedipus's body is buried, that land will receive a blessing of military dominance.
So Creon wants to bring Oedipus home and restore him.
Absolutely not. Creon is a purely political creature. Because Oedipus is still polluted, Creon can't let him actually live inside the city of Thebes.
Right, the miasma.
So his plan is to drag Oedipus back and force him to live just outside the border of Thebes. That way, Thebes gets the magical protection of the bones when he dies, without having to deal with the pollution of the man while he lives. It is incredibly cynical.
And Creon is brutal about it. When Oedipus refuses to go, Creon literally resorts to violence. He has his guards kidnap Oedipus's daughters, Antigone and Isme, right there in the sacred grove.
Which is a huge violation.
He plans to use them as hostages to force Oedipus to comply. It is a terrifying moment until Theseus, true to his word, intervenes with his soldiers and rescues the girls. So we see the pure ugliness of political manipulation. But then an even more heartbreaking encounter happens.
Polynices arrives. This is Oedipus's estranged elder son. Now, some context here. When Oedipus was first discovered to be polluted years ago, Polynices stood by and allowed his father to be banished. He essentially betrayed him.
Right.
But now, Polynices is embroiled in a bitter civil war with his younger brother, Eteocles, for control of the throne of Thebes.
Right, the classic brother against brother succession crisis.
Exactly. Polynices is marching an army against his own city. He comes to Colonus weeping, begging for his father's blessing. Why? Because he too knows about the oracle. The oracle says that whichever brother Oedipus sides with will win the war. Polynices sees his father in rags, claims to be horrified by his condition, and begs for forgiveness and support.
Okay, so you have a son who has done wrong, coming weeping to his father, asking for help. From a Christian perspective, this looks like the perfect setup for a story of redemption.
You'd think so.
You would think, given that Oedipus has found this new serenity, this post-trauma integration in the sacred grove, he might show some mercy, right? He might be the bigger man, but the response he delivers is absolutely brutal.
He absolutely unloads on his son. He offers zero forgiveness. None. He listens to Polynices' tears, and then he issues a terrifying fatalistic curse. He tells Polynices that he will never conquer Thebes. Instead, he prays to the gods that his two sons will slaughter each other on the battlefield.
I want to read the exact lines because they are chilling. He says, "Die foully by a fratricidal hand, and foully slay him who hath banished thee. Such is my curse." He is literally praying for his own children to violently murder each other.
It is so dark.
Here is where I have to pause and push back on the whole hero narrative. Wait, hold on. I thought Oedipus was supposed to be the enlightened, wise elder now, the hero who is going to bless Athens. How is cursing your children to a bloody death a sign of heroic wisdom? This feels like a massive regression into bitterness.
It feels horrific to us, but this raises an incredibly important point, and it is exactly where we hit the absolute ceiling of pagan theology. You have to understand how justice operated in the Greek worldview of the 5th century BC. Justice wasn't about restoration. It was purely reciprocal.
Reciprocal, like an eye for an eye.
Yes, but even more deeply ingrained as a moral duty. The Greek code of honor and shame dictated that a good, virtuous man has two primary obligations: to help his friends and to harm his enemies. There is no category in this worldview for substitutionary atonement, and there is certainly no category for true, unmerited forgiveness.
Help your friends, harm your enemies. That is the baseline of pagan morality.
Correct. And Oedipus feels no personal moral guilt for his past crimes. He insists to the very end that his murder of his father and marriage to his mother were unwitting, a trap set by the gods. Because he feels no internal guilt, he feels no need to extend mercy.
Right.
His sons, however, wronged him knowingly by letting him be exiled. Therefore, they are his enemies. And what does a good Greek hero do to his enemies? He harms them. Oedipus feels entirely justified in his hatred. He's giving them exactly what they deserve according to the laws of reciprocal justice.
He feels righteous in his rage. This is so important because this stark lack of grace throws the teachings of Jesus into such sharp, beautiful, radical relief. When we reflect on this as Christians, we have to look at the Sermon on the Mount.
We have to.
In Matthew 5:44, Jesus stands up and says, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." To the Greek mind, to a man like Oedipus, that statement is utter foolishness. It is weakness. It is a violation of honor.
To love an enemy in the ancient world was to invite shame upon yourself. The play shows us the ultimate tragedy of a world without grace. When you live by reciprocal justice, you end up with generational curses. You end up with an endless cycle of violence that can only end in mutual destruction.
Wow, yeah.
Oedipus curses his sons will go on to kill each other, fulfilling the curse, and the trauma will just continue to ripple outward. There is no way out of the cycle. Human nature, left to itself, cannot break the loop of vengeance.
So how does this scene inspire a Christian to live more fully for Christ today?
It inspires us by showing us the terrifying alternative to grace. And it reminds us what it costs to break the cycle. Christians are called to break cycles of bitterness, to break generational curses through the power of the cross.
Yes.
We can forgive even when we have been deeply knowingly wronged because we have been forgiven. We aren't trapped in the endless loop of reciprocal justice, constantly trying to harm our enemies because Christ took the ultimate harm upon himself.
When you see Oedipus's unyielding rage, when you see a father condemn his sons to death, it makes you so profoundly grateful for the grace of Jesus. It is a stark reminder that true spiritual enlightenment isn't just about gaining insight into your fate or becoming a powerful figure. It is about having a transformed heart that can offer mercy when vengeance is culturally justified. It makes me think about my own life. How many times do I operate on the help my friends, harm my enemies principle without even realizing it? How often do I withhold forgiveness because I feel justified? Looking at the ugliness of Oedipus's curse makes me want to run toward the grace of Christ.
That is a great takeaway.
Okay, so after uttering this dark, terrible curse on his sons, the atmosphere of the play immediately, violently shifts. The heavens literally open up. And this brings us to our final act, the climax of the story. The mysterious translation and the final hope.
The climax of the play is truly awe-inspiring. Sophocles creates this incredible sense of divine imminence. The sky darkens, thunder crashes, lightning flashes across the stage. The chorus is terrified, praying for mercy, and then something miraculous happens to Oedipus.
Yeah, this part is amazing.
This man, who has been completely blind, who has relied on his daughters to lead him every single step for years, suddenly receives an inner supernatural sight.
He literally stands up and takes charge. He says, "This way, my children, follow me, for I am now your guide, as you were mine." It gives me chills.
It is a powerful moment.
He confidently leads King Theseus and his daughters away from the chorus, deep into a secret spot in the sacred grove. And then there is a divine summons. A voice from heaven calls out to him.
We don't see it happen on stage, of course. A messenger returns to tell the chorus what happened. The messenger reports that a terrifying, disembodied voice called out, saying, "Oedipus, Oedipus, why thus delay our going, this long while we are stayed for and thou tarriest, come away."
The gods are literally calling him home, and what happens next is so strange and mysterious. He doesn't die of old age. He doesn't die of a disease. He isn't struck by lightning.
Oh.
The messenger says that after Oedipus said goodbye to his daughters, he walked forward with only King Theseus. And then he was just gone. The messenger says that either a divine escort came for him from heaven, or the earth simply opened kindly, splitting apart so he would feel no pain, and he descended into the underworld. He vanished without a groan, without a struggle. He was translated.
This concept of translation, being taken directly by the divine without experiencing the normal agony of death, has fascinating direct parallels in the Bible. It is a concept that shows up in the Old Testament. Think of Enoch in Genesis chapter 5, who walked with God and he was not, for God took him.
Oh, that is a great connection.
Or the prophet Elijah in 2 Kings chapter 2, who was walking with Elisha when a chariot of fire appears and Elijah is taken up into heaven in a whirlwind.
And ultimately, all of those translations point forward to the ascension of Jesus in Acts chapter 1, where he is lifted up in a cloud while his disciples watch.
What is truly fascinating here is how the early church fathers interacted with pagan stories like this. The theological critique we reviewed points to thinkers like Basil of Caesarea and Augustine of Hippo. When they read these pagan myths, these stories of mysterious translations and heroic ascensions, they didn't just throw them away as worthless demonic lies. They saw them as evidence of something called common grace.
Common grace, meaning God has planted certain truths or desires in all of humanity, even those who didn't have access to the Hebrew scriptures.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ecclesiastes says God has put eternity into man's heart. The early church fathers saw in Sophocles a reflection of humanity's deep, intuitive, universal longing for immortality. We all have a desperate, built-in desire for a painless return to the divine.
Right.
We have a longing to know that death isn't just the final brutal end, but a transition to something greater. The Greeks felt that longing acutely, and they wrote it into their best plays. Oedipus's painless departure was the ultimate wish fulfillment for a society terrified of death.
They were grasping in the dark for a hope that they didn't fully have. But, as always, our biblical synthesis brings us back to the stark, glorious difference in the Christian hope. Because while the play ends with the mystery of a man swallowed by the earth to become a protective ghost in the underworld, the Christian story ends with a bodily resurrection into the light.
The contrast could not be clearer or more profound. Think about where the power of Oedipus lies. It relies entirely on secrecy. Theseus is sworn by Oedipus never to reveal the location of the grave to anyone, not even to Oedipus's own daughters. The security of the city depends on hidden bones, in a dark, secret place that no one can ever verify. It is an elite, hidden mystery.
And the gospel relies on the exact opposite. It relies on massive, undeniable public witness. It doesn't rely on a secret grave guarded by a king. It relies on an empty tomb that everyone, women, disciples, Roman guards, enemies, was invited to look into.
Yes, come and see.
The angel tells a woman, "Come, see the place where he lay. He is not here, he is risen." The Christian hope isn't a shadow fading into the underworld. It is a physical, living Savior who has conquered death out in the open, ate broiled fish with his friends, and promised to return.
The Greeks could only hope for a peaceful descent into the shadows. That was their ceiling. Christians are promised a bodily resurrection into a new heavens and a new earth. Engaging with a play like Oedipus at Colonus allows us to feel the heavy weight of that universal human longing for immortality, and then marvel at how God actually answered it in history. It wasn't through a secret grave, but through the triumph of Easter morning.
That is just, well, it is breathtaking. Let's take a breath and recap this entire journey as we head into our final thoughts. We started by asking a pretty bold question. How can a 2,400-year-old pagan play about a cursed, exiled man deepen a Christian's faith today?
And what we discovered is that Oedipus at Colonus is a profound, unflinching exploration of suffering, of the trauma of living in a broken world, and of the desperate human desire for sanctuary. By studying it closely, we can actually see the shape of the gospel outlined in the shadows of ancient Greek tragedy.
Yeah.
The darkness of the play makes the light of Christ shine so much brighter.
We see the beauty of unconditional hospitality in King Theseus, and it instantly reminds us of Christ welcoming us when we were polluted by sin. We see this deep, intuitive human longing for a curse to become a blessing, for our suffering to mean something, and we realize that only Christ on the cross actually achieved that for the entire world.
Right.
And we see the brutal, destructive limits of a worldview built on reciprocal justice, without any concept of forgiveness, which makes us cling so much tighter to the unmerited grace of Jesus.
And stepping back to look at the bigger picture, it reminds us that engaging with culture, even ancient pagan culture, is incredibly valuable. The Apostle Paul told the Thessalonians to test everything, hold fast what is good.
Exactly.
When we take the time to understand the deep universal longings embedded in Greek literature, the longing for a mediator, the longing for immortality, we are much better equipped to talk to our friends, our neighbors, and our modern culture. We can point them from the inevitable tragedies of this life to the true, living, historical hope of Christ.
Which brings us right back to where we started today. We talked at the very beginning about ancient ruins, about museums, and how we like to keep the past at a safe distance behind velvet ropes. But the spiritual realities this play deals with, the crushing weight of guilt, the terror of death, the desperate need for a savior to intervene, they are not behind velvet ropes.
No, they are not.
They aren't trapped in 401 BC. They are the realities you and I face every single day. So I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder as you go about your day. Think about the contrast we just discussed. In Sophocles' world, a city's ultimate security came from hiding the bones of a broken man in a secret grave. A grave that no one could ever visit, no one could ever verify, and no one could ever draw near to. It was a hope based on hiding in the dark.
Right.
But as a Christian, your ultimate security comes from a grave that was intentionally left wide open for the whole world to see. Your Savior didn't stay in the dirt to protect a single piece of real estate. He rose from the dead to secure your eternal soul. So ask yourself, what secret graves of worldly security are you relying on today? Are you trusting in hidden things, your bank account, your reputation, your political affiliations, when you could be living boldly and freely in the unshakable power of the empty tomb? Let the empty tomb be your sanctuary today.